For the first 30 seconds of this video, imagine discovering that the most famous puzzle game of all time secretly existed in multiple forbidden versions, strange prototypes, and almost released editions that nearly changed gaming history forever. Because today we are diving deep into the lost, hidden, and quietly erased versions of Tetris that Nintendo never wanted the public to fully see, versions that reveal bizarre design choices, legal chaos, and alternate realities where Tetris could have become a very different game. So stay until the end, because some of these versions almost rewrote gaming as we know it. Tetris looks simple on the surface, just falling blocks, clean lines, and familiar music. But behind that simplicity lies one of the messiest and strangest development stories in video game history. A story filled with international disputes, rushed ports, unfinished builds, and experimental versions that were either buried, cancelled, or quietly forgotten because they did not fit Nintendo's carefully controlled image of what Tetris should be. Before Tetris became the perfectly polished Game Boy phenomenon that everyone remembers, it existed in wild forms that looked nothing like the clean and friendly puzzle game we know today, including early computer versions with harsh colors, confusing interfaces, and difficulty curves so brutal they felt more like punishment than entertainment. Which is ironic considering that Tetris was never meant to be addictive, but somehow became one of the most psychologically powerful games ever created. One of the earliest lost versions comes from the Soviet-era computer builds, where Tetris appeared on machines most people outside the USSR had never even heard of, featuring block speeds that increased unpredictably, missing sound effects, and scoring systems that felt almost hostile to the player, making it less of a relaxing puzzle and more of a test of endurance. And when these versions reached the West through unofficial channels, many developers were shocked at how raw and unfinished the game originally was. Then came the arcade experiments, versions that were developed quickly to cash in on Tetris fever. But Nintendo was not involved yet, which led to cabinets with strange color palettes, altered block physics, and music that felt completely wrong versions, where pieces could fall faster than human reaction time, and where the game sometimes punished players simply for surviving too long, making these builds infamous among early arcade testers who described them as fascinating but exhausting. When Nintendo finally stepped in, they didn't just want Tetris, they wanted control, and that control meant deciding which versions lived and which ones disappeared. Because Nintendo's vision was simple, Tetris needed to feel universal, friendly, and endlessly replayable, not stressful, ugly, or confusing, which meant many experimental builds were quietly scrapped, never officially released, and later erased from marketing and documentation. One of the most shocking lost versions was an early Nintendo prototype that experimented with story elements. Yes, an actual narrative-driven Tetris, where players advanced through stages representing factories, cities, and abstract worlds, with blocks symbolizing construction materials. A concept Nintendo quickly abandoned because it complicated a game whose power came from its pure simplicity. But this version existed long enough to leave behind screenshots and internal notes that still fascinate historians today. There were also multiplayer experiments Nintendo tested and then buried, including competitive modes that allowed players to directly interfere with each other. S-boards in ways far more aggressive than the later garbage line systems modes that caused chaos rather than fun and often ended matches in seconds, making Nintendo realize that too much interference destroyed the hypnotic flow that made Tetris special in the first place. Perhaps the most mysterious lost versions are the regional builds that never left certain markets, versions with altered music, different visual themes, and even modified rules designed to match local tastes, including a version rumored to have religious symbolism, removed for international release, and another where block shapes were subtly changed to reduce difficulty changes. Nintendo later denied ever making, despite evidence from collectors and leaked cartridges. Legal battles also played a huge role in burying versions of Tetris, because during the late 1980s, multiple companies believed they owned the rights to different forms of the game, leading to rushed releases, cancelled projects, and half-finished builds that were abandoned overnight when lawyers stepped in, leaving behind digital ghosts of games that technically existed but were never allowed to be sold. One especially infamous cancelled version was nearly released on a competing handheld before Nintendo secured exclusive rights. A version that reportedly featured color graphics years before the Game Boy Color. But once Nintendo took control, this version vanished almost instantly. Copies destroyed, marketing pulled, and developers forced into silence, turning it into one of gaming's most intriguing what-if scenarios. Nintendo's obsession with polish also led to the quiet removal of difficulty spikes, visual experiments, and rule variations that testers found frustrating, meaning that what we play today is actually the most refined and least aggressive version of Tetris ever created, while the lost versions represent a darker, harsher lineage of the game that most players never experienced. What makes these lost Tetris versions so fascinating is that they prove how fragile gaming history really is, because without collectors' leaks and dedicated preservationists, these experiments would be completely erased, leaving us with the illusion that Tetris simply appeared, fully formed and perfect, when in reality it was shaped by mistakes, failures, and decisions made behind closed doors. Even today, developers analyze these lost builds to understand what works and what doesn't in puzzle game design, studying how small changes in speed, color, or sound can completely alter a player's emotional response, turning relaxation into stress or fun into frustration, which is why Tetris remains one of the most studied games in history. The idea that Nintendo didn't want you to see these versions isn't about conspiracy, but about branding, because Nintendo understood early on that mystery and consistency were powerful tools, and showing the rough, strange, and sometimes broken versions of Tetris would have shattered the clean myth of perfection they were building around the game. Today, these lost versions live on through emulation, leaked ROMs, developer interviews, and collector discoveries, allowing modern players to experience a side of Tetris that feels unfamiliar, intense, and sometimes unsettling, reminding us that even the simplest games have complicated and messy origins. And perhaps the most intriguing part of all is realizing that somewhere in a forgotten archive or an unopened box, there may still be versions of Tetris no one has ever seen, waiting to be rediscovered, versions that could challenge everything we think we know about one of the greatest games ever made. If you enjoyed uncovering these hidden chapters of gaming history and want more deep dives into lost versions, forbidden prototypes, and the secrets behind classic games, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment with which lost version shocked you the most, and share this video with a friend who loves retro gaming as much as you do, because the past of gaming is far stranger than it looks, and we are just getting started.